Good afternoon, everybody. I am not the one giving this workshop. I just have the privilege of introducing the people who will be running this workshop and praying for them. The title of our workshop is Help, Our Building is Getting Older. That means nothing about the age of the gentleman who will be doing this workshop. We have Mark Cuthbert and John Boyachek leading us through this conversation. But before we start, let's pray. Father in heaven, we thank you for this time that you've given us to talk about how we would steward the buildings that you've given us. We thank you for these assets, and we pray that you'd help us to truly steward these buildings well for the advancement of your kingdom and the good of your people. And so we ask that you be with Mark and with John as they speak to us. Give them wisdom so that they may impart their wisdom to us. This we pray in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
All right?
Amen. Good afternoon. There's a handout there if you didn't get one, three different sheets. Just to introduce ourselves, John, you can. I am at Summerside Community Church in London. I've been there for 32 years. We went through a building program. When I got there, my wife refused to come to church because the basement where they had the Sunday school class was a moldy, mildewy place. She says, I'm not putting my kids in there. And then that ended up being torn down. We ended up building a whole new building, and there's a lot behind it, and I won't spend all the time doing that. But so I've been through some of that stuff, and I understand the importance of the building. And it's interesting, I just sat through the seminar with Jim DeMarsh. I forget the name of it, but if you missed it, I would encourage you to listen to it after this, because he's talking about how your building gets used, and that's a part of what we're going to be dealing with, not how to use it, but if you are going to use your building for the community, how can you do the best you can with the building. There's a handout on the sheet there, make sure to get it. So John, introduce yourself.
I'm John Boyachek. I haven't been at a place for 32 years. I've been in ministry, pastoring for over 30 years, but I'm right now at Bramley Baptist Church. I've only been there for a year and a half, doing some revitalization projects there in terms of renovations. We'll talk about that later. But prior to that, I was for 16 years at Fairview Baptist in Lindsay, and we did some significant renovations there, and we also purchased some land for future expansion and things like that, and went over that. Prior to that, I was on staff at West Park in London, and we transitioned from the old building to the new building. We went through that, experienced that. I was here at Emmanuel here in Barrie, and we moved here, and I moved halfway through this building project to go to West Park in London. And then I was associate pastors in these places. And I started off in Emmanuel Baptist in Exeter. And when I went there, we were pushing about 100 on the Sunday morning. I was the associate youth guy. They brought me on part-time. 5.5 years later, we were building a new building, acquired new land. A real positive time. So I've been through a few building experiences over the past 30 years.
And we are not experts by any means.
No.
Our desire for this is hopefully, maybe we're going to share, one of the things we say is going to be an idea. You say, you know what, that's a good idea, that really applies to me. And if you get one thing that you can apply out of a workshop, that's a success. So there's a handout there, so pick it up on your way in. We're not going to, we didn't expect this many people, so we're glad that you're all here, but we were going to have everybody introduce themselves. But how many, rather than doing that, how many of you are lead pastors? Okay, just a couple. How many of you are like associates or executive pastors, and so I'm assuming you're responsible for building too? How many are on like a building committee, or you are involved in the building in some way? Okay. Any specific things, maybe what is it that you are expecting to get out of this, or hoping? We're hoping to get out of this, not expecting, yeah. We don't want your expectations to be too high. What is it that you're hoping to learn? Is there's something specific that you're thinking, this is sort of what I'm thinking, what I have on my mind?
Just maybe how to better utilize the building that we have with the growth that we've experienced.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I get a lot of questions about the accessibility stuff in terms of what is necessary versus what is nice to have. What's the law, what's not the law? Maybe we're not gonna get into that. And also, where do you get the grants from?
That's a good question. And if we don't mention that, ask about it,
Okay.
because I've got
Awesome.
some thoughts on
Good.
it. Anyone else?
I think these checklists look very interesting.
Okay. Anything else? You guys think, yeah, I've already heard all the other stuff. This is just one I can sit through, right, and do my emails. Okay, John's going to start us on. I'll pray, and then John's going to start us off. Father, we thank you for the privilege that we have of living in a country where we can actually own property and we can have buildings to be able to serve the community and to reach people and to worship you. And we recognize that our buildings are not the true temple, but the people are the true temple of God. And when we gather, we are the people that gather as the temple in the communities that we meet. So help us to understand our buildings, help us to understand how best to maintain them. May this workshop just give us some clarity in our thinking and maybe an idea of something that we can take back and to work on what we're doing and how best we can serve you in this way. In Jesus' name, amen.
Again, like Mark said, we're not experts. We're just sharing with you some things that we've learned along the way. We were just conscripted to do this. So that's why we're here today. But some of the foundational concepts that we want to talk about today is, what is your vision for ministry, and where does your building fit that vision? You think about that, about your building? How does my building help me to do ministry? Building is a tool. That's what it is. It's the church is not the building. The church meets in the building. And how do you do church within that building? And so it's good to ask yourself, what is the vision of my ministry? The church that I'm at, Bramalea now, they had this vision coming on here. I found it quite interesting. This is their vision. It says, our vision is to utilize the passionate witness of our intercultural congregation. Our congregation, we have about 65 different nationalities at our church, and leverage our central location. And our central location is really in the heart of Brampton, and we're right kitty corner to the largest mall in Brampton called Bramalea City Center. And we have about 5-6 acres right on that corner on a major intersection, Dixie and Queen Street. Leverage our central location and facilities to shine prominently and brightly for Jesus locally and globally. Now, when I think of a building, I don't necessarily think of that as an outreach thing, but it is used for outreach. And I do our baptism membership classes, and I ask people why they came to our church. And many people said, I walk by here every day, and I realize I need Jesus, and I've come into this building, and that's why I'm here today. I want to follow after Jesus. I've heard so many stories like that. I can't believe it, from a building. We also have a building that we use for sports ministries, camp ministries, worship ministries, and other things like that for outreach. But that's our vision. That's the vision for our church. But what is your vision, and how do you use that? Is your building about serving the community? And how is it used effectively as that tool? Is it for a children's and youth program? Do you really want to reach children? Do you really want reach youth? And do you use part of the building for that? Is it a multi-use space? Or is it just a simple space just for people on Sunday mornings? How important is music to your ministry? And is your auditorium organized in a way to reflect that music and to be able to hear properly? Are you preparing for growth? We want to expand, and our vision is to expand. And what's our vision about expanding? Parking. Can people park? Or is there enough room to park at your building? People flow. How do people flow through the building? In my previous church in Lindsay, our main door was the back door. And the parking lot was in the back of the church. The front doors were really supposed to be the main doors. They were really nice. The back door kind of looked like a prison. It looked like a prison door. It was just a small little glass when I first went there. All the trash used to be stacked up against right by the back door. And that was really the front door to our community. And did we really want to reflect that? So we changed that up. But what's the vision? And where does the building fit into that vision? What does our building communicate to the community? And what is it that you want it to communicate to the building, to the community? We're a friendly place, we're a welcoming place. You know, one pet peeve when I go visiting other churches, and when I also go to stores, is when there's double doors on a building, and you reach to pull, and you can't pull that one door. Why do you have two? Why don't you use the doors? Or some churches, you go to them and you can't get in any one of the doors, but everybody knows that one door is open, so you can get in that way on a Sunday morning. What does our building communicate to the community, and how do people see you that way? What does your building demonstrate about the value you place on what you believe? Do you do things with excellence? Do you communicate this is a special place to be in? Or is it just us and our friends, and we don't really care how things are? What does it communicate? What do you value? How does that worship space show that you put value on it? Your building is a tool for ministry. The right tool can help get the job done more effectively. And that's what I think of when I think of a building. A building is just a tool for ministry. How is it helping us to enhance our ministry? How is it helping us to, well, not helping us, but hindering our ministry? And how do we work those things through? When I was in previous church, people said, well, why should we expand? Why should we expand? Because the fishbowl is too small. The fishbowl should not tell the fish how big it should get. A ministry, the building's just a tool, and you want to do more ministry, you want to reach more people for Christ. You need to work that vision through. Be careful with the attitude of it's good enough. We're not looking for perfection, but we also don't want to be an excuse for not striving for excellence. So watch out for that. And if your leaders and staff don't hear a clear understanding of the importance of the building to the ministry, then they won't make it a priority to do the work and maintain it. And that's important. This is how we use our building. This is what we use our building for. This is the ministry. I think that's it.
And that last concept, I think, is the key, because if the staff and the elders aren't aligned with the priority of the building, it's going to be a problem. Because the staff may be saying, oh, we really like to do this, and we got to do this and this, and the elders saying, no, we don't have any money for that, we can't do any of that. Well, then it's always going to be a tension. But if you have a clear understanding to say, you know what, God has given us this building, we can do this, and we talk it through, figure out how it's going to work, then there's that sense of a commitment and making it an important thing to do. Now, most of you are in a building and you can't get a new building tomorrow, so you need to think about what are you doing with the space that you have. And unfortunately, we've all seen a lot of buildings that are very tired and look worn out, and even for those of us that have moved into a new building is amazing, it's great, everything's new and fresh. And then 15 years later, it's like, why do we need to replace that air conditioner? We just put that in there 15 years ago. It's like, why is that leaking? You know, how come we need to paint the place? Didn't we just paint the place? It's like you have to be able to keep up the building that you have so that it's looking fresh. And you know, it's like your home. You can be living in a home for a long time and don't notice that, yeah, that scuff mark on the wall or that dirt spot on the carpet, or, you know, yeah, I'm going to get around to that someday. And everybody new who comes to visit your home notices that, right? And you need to think about everybody coming into your church will notice things that you probably just say, it's not a big deal. And they'll say, oh, these people, why don't they do that? So we need to think about, first of all, evaluating properly. And the handouts that I gave you, two of them that I got signed up for this Smart Church Solutions. It's a software program. I'm not endorsing it or promoting it. I just got these free handouts. So, okay, but it may be, for larger churches, it may be something worth looking into. This is a software program that helps you coordinate, keep track of all the stuff going on in your building. And they even have a thing for coordinating rooms, who's using the rooms when, and all that kind of stuff. I mean, unless you have a larger church, it's probably not something that you want to do, unless you want to get on their mailing list and get a lot of emails and free stuff. But if you go to their website, they have these that you can download. But these are helpful tools to be able to just evaluate. Okay, you need to know what needs to be done, and if you don't, then you're going to be frustrated because there are problems that are going to come up. Some of these things, I mean, these are designed for all sizes of churches, so some things may not apply to you, but it is a helpful tool, and use it. Another thing that a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot, but some churches do that I think is a great idea. Call up somebody that you know from another church that maybe doesn't even know your church that well, and say, come and do a walk through our building, and see what you observe, right? And you will be surprised at things they say, oh yeah, that junk in the corner. Yeah, somebody was supposed to clear that up 2 years ago. Or, yeah, the Christmas decorations are still up and it's February. But, you know, it's like there are things that you will just ignore, but when new people come, they communicate something. It's like somebody going to your website in February and finding out that your Christmas services are advertised still. And it's like they say, is there anything going on in the church? Do these people care?
We're just being proactive for next year.
That's right. I hope it's the same day and time. Right? Yeah. So you need to evaluate. You know, when you go to somebody else's house and you say, you know, why don't they just, you know, paint that little spot there? It just really makes it look ugly. You know, people do that when they come to your church. Say, why don't they do this? So think about and a lot of things don't cost a lot of money, but somebody needs to put the effort into making it happen. Churches tend to take on the culture of their leaders, and from my own perspective, okay, like when I started at Summerside, it used to be Westminster Hope. It was this little church, struggling church, small, group of people, and so I was. We didn't have a lot of money. After 2 years, I almost closed the place, but I was frugal, and the problem is my frugality when we were small kept going as the church was growing, and that became a problem because, as we were growing our staff, and they'd say, oh, we should do this. And I said, well, there could be a cheaper way of doing it. I said, well, no, that's not a smart thing, because by doing this new system or implementing this new technology even, it will accomplish far more. And I see it happen. I say, wow, yeah, that really did make a lot of sense. So you need to be aware that as leaders, if you're in a leadership position, you could be influencing the church in a negative way just because of what your preference is. So you need to just be open to changing and to growing. A simple thing is you got to maintain essential systems. Okay, for some of you, if you're in larger churches, you probably already do this automatically. But if you're in a growing church, maybe you're in a smaller church, maybe you don't have that. Maybe, if something, if the furnace breaks down, you call Joe because he fixes his own furnace and he can probably fix the furnace. And as you grow, you can't do that. I mean, when we built our building, and now we've got like 9 furnaces, we've got a contract. And we need a contract so that you know that the furnaces are being maintained regularly. They're coming in, they're changing the filters and doing all that kind of stuff. You got to have the fire plan. You've got to have somebody that's coming in that's checking the fire extinguishers, the fire system. You got to make sure. When we were smaller, we didn't care. It's like nobody was checking. But as you grow, you need to do that because you need those systems. And because if you don't, for one thing, you can get into trouble with the government. If something happens and you don't have those systems in place, you're going to be in trouble with your insurance. So make sure, think about those systems. You know, your HVAC, your electrical, your plumbing, security, audiovisual, cleaning, snow removal. Snow removal is a big deal, right? Making sure that everything is cleared, because you can get into liability if somebody comes, slips, and breaks their leg. And there's actually a case where an elder of the church, a deacon of the church, had to sue the church to be able to get money because his wife fell and broke her something and had to, it was complicated, but that happens. Identify who is in charge. You've got to have somebody in charge, whether you have one deacon that's in charge of everything, or somebody who's a head of maintenance, or if you have certain people in charge of certain places, like maybe you have somebody out in charge of the outside grounds, somebody else in charge of the inside, or if you have a custodian, maybe the custodian is responsible for some of the things that happen. But you have to have somebody who's in charge, and you need to think about how the different systems are being maintained in service. Have a list of people you will call in the case of an emergency. Have a list, have somebody, if there's a plumbing problem, have a plumber that you have on speed dial. Say, this is the guy we've agreed that we're going to have fix our stuff. This is the company that we've agreed that's going to come and service our HVAC. This is who, because that simplifies things. That way, if they come in and there's a flood in the basement and the pastor has to call the chairman of the elders, and the chairman of the elders says, I don't know, I think we should talk to John because he knows somebody who, no, have that ahead of time so they can just, even if there's a secretary, she can make the call to the plumber, the electrician, or whoever to come immediately and deal with the problem, or else it could just become a bigger problem. So some of this is just getting these systems in place, and as churches are smaller, sometimes they say, we don't need that. No, start working on it, because if we are going to expect to grow, we always need to be thinking, what would we need if we were double the size we are? Now some of you think, oh, that would be amazing. No, it would be a challenge for some people. But if you are ready, if you have the systems in place so that you are double the size, if the systems are there, it's easy to grow. If the systems aren't in place, you're going to start growing, you're going to have all kinds of struggles and problems and frustrations. So maintaining those essential systems. Next, decorating. This is a real problem in some churches. Is our decorating style appealing to men, women, or both? Is it kid-friendly? Right? I mean, some places it's like, kids, you got to watch out because there's all this fancy stuff around, and you got to be careful what I say, because I've seen it all. We've had different people in our church. We've got one lady that just loves decorating for Christmas, and they would she put up these ladders with all these things on it. It's like kids could climb up those ladders. It's like stuff could fall, but you got to think about the decoration and have somebody that's in charge of it that understands the vision, right? Because it connects back to your vision. What are you trying to communicate? Does the auditorium feel like a funeral or a celebration? At one point, we used to let, when there's a funeral, we used to let them leave, 3 or 4 bouquets of flowers in front of the auditorium. We never did. If somebody said, oh, we'd like to leave these flowers, okay, let's find some place in the foyer where it isn't going to look like a funeral at the front of the auditorium. So you need to think about what is it you're communicating, because that's a reflection of your vision. If you overdo your seasonal decorations, it can look bare off season. Okay, some churches go overboard with Christmas decorations, these massive Christmas things, and then they take them all down, and like the second week of January, people come in and say, oh, this place is really bare in here. So think about that. Think about what is going to be tasteful, what's going to be easy to deal with, and you don't want to have something that's so complicated they couldn't take it down till it was Halloween, or February the 14th or something like that. So just consider that. Have a schedule for repainting the entire building. I heard this some time ago where somebody said, you think of painting a building, it's a big deal. But if you set a plan to say, okay, every 2 years or every year, we're gonna have the building sort of sectioned off, and we know that we're gonna paint this section, and then next year we're gonna paint this section, the next year, so that after 6 years or whatever, like figure out what works for your building. After so many years, you've repainted the whole building, rather than waiting for the whole building to look like it's really run down and needs a paint job, you can have it keeping it fresh, and painting is relatively inexpensive. Okay, relatively. I know cans of paint are crazy expensive compared to what they used to be. But you can often, it's sometimes you can find, that's one thing that you can sometimes find volunteers for, as long as they're good at what they do, okay? Because you don't want somebody that just slaps it on and doesn't care that it's spilled all over the place. But if you got somebody that is a painter, we've got a couple painters in our church, and it's great because they love doing it. So, but think about like that so that you're keeping it fresh, especially the kids areas and that kind of stuff. Storage. There's an article on storage, and it's great. It's called "Churches Don't Have a Storage Space Problem. They Have a Retaining Problem." Okay? The problem is that we retain too much. And it's a great little article. You got the webpage there to download. You can download it because it's like they talk about why churches tend to retain too much, the impact on ministry, church storage tips, and that kind of stuff. But you need to make sure that every storage space in the building is identified, like what is it for? What are we using this for? Is it children's ministry? Is it Christmas decorations? Is it communion supplies or whatever? Like identify what it is, what the purpose of it is, what it's being used for, and then who's overseeing it. Make sure that somebody is in charge of that storage space. Now, somebody could be in charge of 5 storage spaces, and you'll be surprised how many storage spaces you have. Go through your building. We went through our church and made a list, and I said, we got 10 different storage spaces? And everybody's saying, oh, we don't have enough storage. No, we got tons of storage. We just need to figure out how to use it efficiently and how to make sure that it's maintained. But if nobody is in charge of it, guess what? It's going to just keep piling more stuff in there. And then it's going to be a mess to clean up. So think about storage is a big thing of just trying to keep things organized. Any questions or comments about that part? If not, John?
We have a regular dumpster day.
Good idea.
I just put a dumpster in a parking lot and said, we gotta fill it. And it's funny, you can fill it every year.
Yeah, work bees are great because men love, getting together for breakfast and then doing a work day. But in order to do that properly, you have to have clear plan, know exactly what you want to do. You can accomplish a lot of stuff. You get 20 guys out for a work bee, you can accomplish a ton of stuff, but you have to have it well organized, make sure everything is there that they need to do, and somebody just telling people what they need to do, and you can accomplish a lot. If you don't have that planned out, don't waste your time, because you'll get out there and guys will have a great time having coffee together and nothing's going to get done. You realize, oh, we pulled a couple of weeds out of the grass because we didn't know what else we were supposed to do. So think about that.
Now, there are some churches that do have storage problems. Just
Yes, yeah.
They didn't build storage in their building. I want to talk about expanding and renovating, and I've been through this a little bit. Again, it goes back to the vision. You need to identify how you would like to use the space. My previous church in Lindsay, we went there, and the auditorium was full, and we weren't in a position to expand, and so we wrestled with things, and we wondered if we should expand on the piece of property we're at. We had about 2.5 acres in that property, but it was in an old gravel pit. That's where they put the church, and back in the late 60s, it was on the edge of town, and they got it for free, and they were able to build the church there, and so you could drive by the church and see it's in the hole. And the parking lot was in the back. And they had a plan back in the early 70s when they built the place to expand on the back. And so I went there, and we came up with a plan to expand on the back. And we dreamed up these plans and other things and had it all laid out, had an architect design it. There was an architect in the church. And after we weighed the cost, we realized that expansion would cost, this was 17 years ago, $2.5 million just to expand on that. And I just went through a building project in London, and we built a building there for $5 million. And for $2.5 million, we'd only get a few more more feet for all that work. And I said, is that wise stewardship? Should we be expanding onto this 50-year-old building and with only a few more feet of space, attaching to a building with old systems? All the electrical would have to be upgraded. The walls were built that were too narrow to get through almost with 3 people in a row. The ceilings were too low. Again, our main entrance was the back door. And then we realized if we were to expand into the back of the parking lot, we'd take up more parking spaces. And Lindsay was a very conservative town. Change is not a good word in Lindsay. And there was lots of resistance. I said, folks, we need to think about wise stewardship here. And we ended up hiring a consultant who came in, who knew churches, who knew buildings, and they saw our land and they said, well, this is what you could do with this land if you wanted to double the size of the building. And we realized it would just force all our parking out. And the stewardship of that place was not going to be very good for that 2.5 acres. In fact, we couldn't use the 2.5 acres properly. And so after wrestling with that, the congregation decided, no, we need to be searching for new land. So we ended up doing a major renovation of the building so we can live in it for a number of years and find a piece of land and hopefully get out on there. We found a piece of land, and then COVID came, and it was hard to do fundraising during COVID, saying, hey, take a look how full we are when nobody's there. And but hopefully they'll get on the land sometime in the future. But yeah, having a vision and identifying how you'd like to use the space for the future vision, and thinking about your successor, thinking about the people who have had with you. How would you like this place, this building to be used for future ministries? Having a vision that way. Have an initial assessment to evaluate the options, and that's just wise stewardship. How are you going to use that building properly? Be creative about your location and property. My previous church, it was on a busy intersection, and that wasn't necessarily an asset. It was a liability. There were too many accidents out front. It was a bit of a challenge to get in and out of that church too. But be creative about your location and property. What would you like to do with that? And hire a church designer to evaluate your location. That was some of the best money spent, because you could have them come in and the congregation would get mad with them and they could say, I disagree with you. And they'd say, well, we know what we're talking about. And here are the reasons why you should do this and should not do this. And what will your future vision be, and how feasible it would be to do effective ministry at that location and with your building. And it's good to really wrestle through those things and really seek the Lord on those things. And as I've gone through relocations with other buildings in the past, there was never a regret. The tool for ministry was too small. And we wanted to do more ministry and reach more people. So we had to take a major step of faith and do these relocations. Expanding leadership, okay? The pastor must own and speak about the vision and direction. And it does not mean that the pastor has to do everything, but the pastor needs to be behind what's going on and need to be able to speak for it and be a champion for it. As much as that pains me to say that, I haven't seen a building project, a big endeavor move forward without the pastor at least being a cheerleader behind it and being part of that vision. It's so important. You need a point person who is respected within the congregation, who will help field questions so the pastor doesn't have to field those questions. You know, somebody says, why are we doing chairs instead of pews? Or why are we doing pews instead of chairs? Or why is the building built like this? And that point person could field those questions and work through those struggles and those challenges. they could take that information down, they can explain the vision over and over again to people who want to know why we're changing. Just having that point person who might even chair the construction committee or the renovation committee, whatever you're doing that way. And so, yeah. So when it comes to a team, you need some type of team for moving forward with construction. Your point person should probably be the chair, who knows what's going on in terms of the project, what's supposed to be done. And I would also suggest that you consider people with a vision for ministry and design, construction people who understand the reality of costs of things, and having an influential voice who would know things about construction. And these people that talk at a town hall meeting or something like that, and being the front people, which is part of this construction team or renovation team, would be very helpful. So it doesn't have to be a large team either. You could do it with a smaller group. Any questions about that so far? Yes.
It's maybe tied to this, so if you want to push it to later, take a shot at it later. I've been hearing a lot that, like, we're not even considering a building project because it's too expensive to buy land in Canada, and it's almost like that option is not even on the table. In your experience, is that true?
It's always too expensive.
Yeah.
It's always too expensive.
Right. So a new building project is just not realistic?
No, I'm saying historically it's always been too expensive.
Oh, sure.
And so that's always an excuse for taking the step of faith and saying, okay, Lord, how we need to do ministry effectively here. And our building and our locations a hindrance here. We're seeking your direction. We're looking for a miracle here. We're looking for a miracle piece of property. And in Lindsay, we couldn't even, land was so expensive. And we found a piece that was zoned for institutional church. Not only that, it was in town, and we weren't allowed to build outside of town. We could find property outside of town, but we weren't allowed to build outside of town. Water, sewer, and everything was there. And the price was right. And God just allowed these things to happen. This building here, this location here, this was nowhere near Barrie when we were looking at this piece of property. And the place that we were at, we were also landlocked. Parking was difficult. The building, we were just so tight in there, saying, Lord, what do you want to do? And we had to look all over the place within Barrie when we were here. And all of a sudden, this piece of property came up, again, zoned properly for us at the right price. And God just seemed to say, okay, that's the piece of property for you.
So how do you address that? It's like a constant rebuttal. Well, it's too expensive. It's not practical to buy land anymore in Canada. This is the state of things, you know. So we can't do that. So we just got to deal with what we have.
Maybe just,
Yeah.
if you want to, there comes to a point where if you are going to grow your ministry, you need space. And if you don't have your own space, there's no guarantee you're going to have space. So at some point, you have to take a step of faith and say, this is something we believe God wants us to do because it's going to be a tool for ministry like we've been talking about. We have a vision that if we had space, we could do things that we could not do with that space. In our case, we were on 1 acre. We had an auditorium that Dr. David Barker built when he was from Heritage. He built, and they paid $175,000 to build this little 2-story place with an auditorium that would seat about 120. We knocked out the back wall so we could seat 160. And then the city came along and says, we're going to expropriate you guys because we're widening the road. So the appraiser came along, and we said, what can we do? Expropriation, nothing you can do. He came along and says, okay, we're going to give you $266,000 for your whole building. So we can't even buy property. Like this was like 17, 18 years ago. We can't even buy property for that in town. What are we going to do? But we thought, fortunately, he said, well, we went to the city doesn't want to spend that much, so we're just going to take off the old 100-year-old building that's in the front, the one with the wet, moldy basement, and he said, we'll do that for like 100, I think it was about like 144. Well, it's, I guess it's the best we can do. God led me through a friend of mine who's living in Pickering. He was in a dispute with Habitat for Humanity, who was trying to build a house in their neighborhood where they had all these big fancy houses. And he talked Habitat for Humanity to build a duplex that looked like all the other houses on the street, so everybody was happy. And he developed a friendship with this guy, with Bruce Freeman, who was had been an appraiser for the city of Ajax and for a developer. And he says, you need to meet Bruce. Bruce said, I've seen too many churches ripped off. He says, I'll help you. You pay my expenses, I'll do it for you. In the end, the city ended up taking the old building off. They paid us $600,000, and they had to pave our parking lot. We had a gravel parking lot. They had to pay for paving our parking lot. They had to pay for every bush they removed. They had to pay, he says, this is the law. The law says it costs you nothing. He says, but if you don't know that, then you're stuck. So in the end, that became the seed for us to be able to expand. And then, we raised $400,000 on a 3-year pledge, which gave us about $1 million to work with. And if you had told me we were going to build what we ended up building 2 years before we did it, I would have said impossible. There is no way we could ever do that. And yet God provided. And we ended up building, ended up being like a $2 million building that we did, dragged it out over a few years because we did some creative things to be able to do that. But God provided, and we look back and say it's just amazing. And it was like God did something that we did not expect, but as a result, the community is being reached. So you never know how
Well,
God's
I
going to
guess
provide.
in our situation, it's like, well, we'll just do another service, because we can't buy land, so we'll just do another service. And so eventually you're doing 2 services, 3 services, and it becomes like land or do the easy solution, which is just, hey, we'll just do another service. And that's where I kind of go, when do you go? You do 18 services if you want, but is that rooted ultimately?
Can you sustain that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And part of it is just saying, okay, Lord, we need to do something different here. And sometimes just with the leadership, you have to pray about that, think about that. Sometimes you throw it out to the congregation. We're just wondering about what the Lord wants us to do here. Let's be in prayer for this. Let's seek the Lord in this. And it's interesting. Sometimes I've heard story after story, many times, of as the congregation hears about this and praying about it, usually the most unlikely person comes to you and says, I found a piece of land for us that I think we should buy. When I was in Exeter, we were looking for 5 acres outside of town, and Exeter is it's a country community, and we're allowed to build outside of town. And we asked all the farmers along Highway 4, the main highway going up there, would you sell land to us or anything like that? Everybody said, no, we won't do that. We won't sever it. We won't do anything like that. And then, again, we're exploding, trying to figure out what to do here. And this farmer that we approached came to us. He said, you know what? It'd be nice to get a new combine. and I will sell you the 5 acres. It's 5 acres of prime property right on 2 major intersections. And the Lord just saw through that we could build there and put that church down. And it's about seeing, it's about taking a step of faith and seeing miracles happen too.
Yeah.
And it's huge.
Just another comment, getting back to the vision thing, you need to have a vision for what you want your church to be. When we did our addition, when we did it, we originally said, we're going to build an auditorium for 400, and it's not going to be one that we can plan to expand. We're going to be able to start other churches from that, because you can have 2 services in there. Other churches have a different vision. West Park is a regional church that is a large church that ministers to a larger area, you know, and they've got a different vision. And so you've got to think, what is it that God would want us to do? And is it multiplying? Is it, you know, but like, you got to think strategically and pray and make sure that the vision drives what you need to do.
Good question. Just going ahead here, in terms of leadership, I can, when it comes to planning and also some changes, I would say that you hire an outside consultant, an architect that understands churches. This building here, one of the elders in the church was an architect. He's a famous architect here in town, well respected man, and he built one or two churches. Most of the buildings he did were institutional buildings. And so when he completed the plan, he hired a church architect just to scrutinize his plans, because he realized that church architects know people movement, know how things should flow. Regular architects do things by code, and in churches, to have 2 stalls in the women's bathroom, I think you're going to have problems if you have 200 people in the church, right? It's you're going to have a backlash, or code says you only need these amount of parking spaces for your church. Well, that might be code, but it's not practical. And many times, the consultants that understand churches understand some of the challenges and the dynamics of churches. So when looking at expansion, yeah, you might have an architect in the church, but you definitely want somebody who understands churches, understands acoustics, understands people flows. It's very important, because I've seen too many buildings where people flow and acoustics and parking and bathrooms were never considered. We're doing it by code. We're doing it by code, and everybody complains about it. Why can't I move through here? So, and hire specialists that understand what needs to be done. For instance, sound and audio consultants. They cost a lot, but to have good sound within your auditorium for worship, it's just a pain if the acoustics aren't right. It's difficult. It's no fun. And many times when the building's being built, those things need to be built into the architect. So you need to hire sound and audio consultants and designers. Hire an interior decorator. Some of the wars that happen in the church is because somebody picked certain colors, okay? And who picked those colors? And fights go on. It's best to hire an interior decorator and say, the interior decorator picked it, and you blame the interior decorator. It stops all the, okay, and we're all mad at the interior designer. So I've seen it. Landscaping. You might have somebody gifted in your church, fine, but many times to think about landscaping and what needs are, not just somebody saying, hey, I got a bush from home, I'm going to bring it here and put it here. Just thinking those things through. Specialists that understand what need to be done. Spending and renovating, counting the costs. There's lots of costs. To serve in the kingdom, to move forward, there's a sacrifice. And when we were doing renovations on our auditorium in my previous church, we had to be out of the auditorium for 4 months. And we had to go to the local high school, and it was a pain, setting up every Sunday, having the acoustics right. And so there was pressure on the staff to pull these things off, and then having children's ministry within the school. It's a challenge, but that's part of doing ministry. And the staff is doing ministry in less than ideal spaces, and sometimes off-site when there are changes going on, and being asked to do more than their regular ministry, including extra meetings and deadlines. To do an expansion, there's going to be sacrifice, and leadership need to get together for planning, for going above and beyond the ministry duties to get those projects done. It just takes more time. There's a cost that way. There's a commitment on the pastor, okay? The pastor must take the lead for some things in terms of helping to fundraise and finances and saying, hey folks, we need to get behind this. And some of the big decisions, the pastor sometimes needs to say, okay, we're heading in this direction, and this is the reason why, and they need to take the lead in those areas. And sometimes it's costly for some pastors. So there's sacrifices. And any type of change requires sacrifice. And a building renovation, building expansion causes sacrifices, financial sacrifices. And it will be costly. However, if it's done right and the space is used for ministry, the unity from that far outweighs it all. Yes, you're going to lose people in the process. You're going to have some naysayers who say, no, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this. Chuck Swindoll talks about when he was in California, he had this one person who was so against the new expansion that they were doing, new auditorium expansion. And it was just his loyal opposition to the whole thing. And so when the expansion and everything was done, Chuck was walking through the atrium. And he was behind a pillar. And he saw this guy who was his loyal opposition come on into the auditorium, come on into the foyer there. And he had a group of people. And he said, I just want to show you the marvelous thing that God has done here. and how we can use this place for ministry. And he went on and on, even though he was a loyal opposition. It's interesting how hard some things can be going through the process. And even coming to this building, I could tell you when Rick Buck was here and just some of just the hardships and the challenges, and it was costly. But we were able to move into a building that could house in the service double the amount of people, and it's a great blessing for ministry here. The final costs are usually higher than the estimates. Okay, you need to realize that. Have a contingency fund for unforeseen things. And typically I say, the building will give you, the builder can build you a room, okay? And it's nice to have walls, doors, but to furnish it costs even more. And there's so much square feet, but to furnish it costs more, and you need to think those things through. And I find that it's wise to say, this is the estimate. This is the estimate, okay? The actual, you will not fully know until the project's done. And that's important. So count the cost. There's how are we going to do ministry during renovations? And right now we are looking at doing a auditorium update at my church, and we're wrestling through how are we going to do that and also do ministry at the same time. You may have to move to a rented space like a school or gym or a community center. It's a challenge for a church my size to do that. And so we're just wrestling that one through. Prepare for a possible setup and tear down each week. People can get lost in the change. And if you move off site, sometimes people leave the church, go to another place, they get lost. And that's part of the cost, unfortunately. Let's talk about finances, okay? Raising the funds. Part of raising the funds is communication. Communication is the key, and getting a communication plan together on how to do that. This is what we're doing at our church. We're calling it Operation Revitalization. And our building that we're in right now is 40 years old. We have a roof that's roughly that age. We have HVAC that's roughly that age. We've got an ugly, ugly parking lot. We have some very dated interior. We have some mechanical issues. And we have some other things. And so we came up with this plan, Operation Revitalization, and the initial estimates in doing it all was going to take us 5 years and $500,000 over 5 years, and it will cost us $2.5 million, which is a lot of money. we just finished, prices have come in and we're closer to $4.1 million. So this is a bit of a challenge, but this is a big thing that we made a big banner. It's up in our lobby for people to see. It's huge. We've done town hall meetings just to tell people what we're doing, what's going on. And as the plan is changing or things continue to evolve, we try to communicate that well to people. We have in our bulletin where things are at with our operation revitalization and what's happening. This week we're starting with part of our roof, and we thought the roof would cost $500,000. It's going to cost close to $1.5 million to get done. And we thought the parking lot would cost about $500,000. It's going to cost $1.4 million to get it done. So these are challenges that you live with, and you see how God's going to provide. But we at least have a plan. We're heading in a direction. And that's just communicate. For a major project, consider hiring a fundraising consultant. And this church and also the church in London at West Park there, we hired a fundraising consultant who helped coach the church towards raising funds for the big project. And yeah, they cost a fair amount of money, but they help you to raise that money. They just hold your feet to the fire, so you do the tasks that need to be done to really go out after people and say, hey, what can you commit to this? And how can we help do this project together? And so I would highly recommend considering hiring a fundraising. Again, you blame them, and as you go through that. Typically, the rule of thumb in terms of a major project is have on hand a third of the cost, raise a third of the cost as you go up through that, and borrow a third of the cost. And it's typically how you move forward. That's how we move forward here at Emmanuel.
Do you get pushback on the border?
What's that?
Do you get pushback on borrowing mortgage?
Sure, you get pushback or borrow, but try not to borrow if you can have all the money together, that's great, but many times you can't. So if you can raise a third, if you can have a third on hand, raise a third, and then borrow a third, that's manageable too.
Just, you may be referring to some people that think that churches should not borrow any money.
Yes.
Okay, I don't buy that argument, because if we don't borrow the money and build, we're gonna have to rent. So where do I want to put the money? Do I want to put the money against the mortgage, or do I want to pay somebody rent for space? It's the same, you end up paying the same amount, sometimes more. So it doesn't make, the argument doesn't make sense in terms of whether we borrow to build so that we can have our own space, or we're just gonna pay rent and end up paying that same amount over a long period of time. So that's, you gotta evaluate that, right?
And it's about taking a calculated risk too, and not getting too much debt so that you can't do this.
Is it becoming more difficult to borrow? There's an organization here.
Oh, there's an organization here, in fact, we're using them, and I highly endorse them. It's called CCAC, CCBC. Anyways, they're out of Alberta, and they will loan up to $3.5 million to your church at 2.5%. So try to beat that interest rate. So, and they're phenomenal. We're very, very pleased with the process we've done through that. No, it's tough to find lenders out there. These ones have come on the scene in the past few years in Ontario here, and they have some ways to do that.
And because if you go to the bank will give you agricultural rate. At least that's the best we could get. They were going to offer us an agricultural rate which was like 6%. This was like years ago, and we were blessed because when there was another organization that was, I forget the name of it, another Christian organization that was here. They just came to Canada. I just contacted them the week before we were going to sign with the bank, and they said, "Oh, we'll give you a rate," and it was like 4%, and it was like pay it off. You can pay it off whenever. Like it was a 20-year mortgage, but you could pay it off earlier. And they actually dropped the rate as the mortgage went on. And it was like God provided. You know.
Church of Christ Development Corporation, that's what they're called. They're over there. Highly recommended. They really want to lend out to churches, and it's a ministry. And yeah, up to 3.5 million they would do for some churches. So I'd highly, if you're looking to borrow funds, I'd highly recommend them. Ask people for a given pledge, maybe a 1-year pledge or a 3-year pledge or a 5-year commitment. And when we were going through this building project, it was a 5-year commitment that we asked people to consider giving to as we were raising the funds for this. Yes?
What's the status of asking people to loan money to the church? Years ago, when we went through a project, quite a few of our members purchased, loaned money to the church, got a bond, and it may not have been the best interest rate, but, and the time frame was long, it helped.
Yeah, and the people who are blessed giving bonds, buying bonds on the church, yeah, and it still happens, and I haven't done it. I know
we've done it.
And you've done it?
Yeah.
You guys haven't, but I know they did it here too.
You just gotta be prepared to pay it back.
Yeah, like we did it because we had our mortgage with the company we were with. They give you, we could not get any more from them. Like that was a set mortgage, but we could offer bonds, and we raised about $200,000 in bonds at 5% interest. And what happens with a number of people, they donate the interest back to the church. And because a number of seniors say, hey, I want to do this as a ministry, and they donate. And for some of them, when the bond came due, if we didn't have the funds, they would just say, I'll take it out of bond again. You know, so I mean, we've been paying it down, and it's over 15 years, and it's pretty well gone.
And you need somebody to champion that for you. But,
and make sure you do it legally, like do it with proper paperwork so that everything's clear. And
who did you do that through? Did you have a?
No, we did our own. We did it ourselves. We had an accountant that just
that helped you with that. Okay.
We got caught by an unbelieving family member who wanted the bond back when the person died.
Okay.
And the person who died did not stipulate what to do with that bond.
Okay.
So that's where we got caught. We're like, whoa. So I think it was like 60,000 like that we had to come up with, from what I understand. So.
And in that case, we have had that happen where we just issued a new bond and somebody else picked it up. Because, you know, for 5%, a lot of people think that's a great, nowadays, that's a great interest rate.
If you hire a fundraising company, the first thing they will ask is leadership. And they pull in pastors, the workers, they pull in the elders, the deacons, or whoever's in your church. They say, leadership, you need to model giving first. And we're going to ask you privately, how much will you contribute, give towards your 5-year commitment. You think about it, you pray about it, and you come on back. And what they would do, they would take those numbers, they'd compile it, and they would say, hey church, as we go into this building project, the leadership has committed this amount of money towards this project. And it was just a way of just showing leadership and saying, hey, we're behind this, and modeling it among the membership. And it's usually a very powerful time. It's definitely a stewardship issue, and it teaches us to be wiser stewards financially with our money. Yeah. The church I'm at in the 80s, a few people took personal mortgages out on their house and gave that to the church in order to finance the building that they built there. I haven't heard that lately, but just a sacrificial giving. It's going to cost, but it's a beautiful thing. Many times it is. There are other funding options for saving money. Some buildings may help you reuse, recycle good material from businesses that are renovating. Mark, you got a story about this?
Yeah, the gentleman in our church who built our building was very creative, and he was always trying to figure out a way. So he was tearing down the Galleria Mall downtown London, and we ended up getting all of the shelving from an Eddie Bauer store that we use in our library. The bricks in our building, we've got bricks, sort of a fascia, all came from the house that we tore down next door. That was part of the thing, so all these old yellow bricks, it looks really nice. The doors into our auditorium are like 9-foot doors that came from a TD Canada Trust building, but you would never know it because they're just, and we got them for free. So there are sometimes things you can do. The other thing he did is our one wing, so he built we built the auditorium with a big foyer, and then we built a wing that was a 6-pack of portables that we bought from the secondary school, the Catholic school board, for $1 a square foot. It was like 5,000 square feet, and we were able to put it on he put it on a permanent foundation, and totally renovated it. You would never know there were portables unless somebody told you, because they're totally renovated, and saved us a ton of money. So what we did is he put them on the building, finished the outside. The inside, they were not finished at all. So after we moved into the building, we started raising more money. As new people came in, we started doing projects to raise money, to put in a kitchen, to put in a nursery, to put in offices. And that was one way in which we saved money by extending it out without borrowing more money. As new people came in, they got excited about building, because people don't get excited about paying off a debt, but they get excited about a project if they see a specific project. And you need to think about your building as something that, this is what God, think about what we could do if we could do this and get people excited so that they can give. You'd be amazed at how much money there is sitting. Like, I heard somebody once say that every church has at least one senior in their probably a senior widow that is a millionaire, and you would never know it because they're sitting on, insurance or whatever, and they're willing to help. We were raising money. We had to do something with our sound system. Was going to cost quite a bit after COVID, and so one man in the church says, I'll match $5,000 for the first $5,000 that come in. It's like, he didn't want to be announced, but I mean, I would have never guessed that he would have given that much. You never know, but you need to challenge people to give, but you have to have a vision for them to give towards.
Very, very important about the vision. Yeah. Explore government accessibility grants, and Aaron, we're not perfect. We're not experts on this one, but there are some out there. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So the same company that the man who built our church, my son-in-law works for them now. We were supposed to put in an elevator when we built, and we didn't. I don't know how we got our grant, our permit to move in, but we did without it. We still haven't built it because we didn't have the funds to do it. But they told us just about a couple of years ago, they said there's this grant. So the government has accessibility grants. They come out for like 3 or 4 months. So you have this period of time where you can apply for this grant, and then it's closed. And churches have gotten it, but it depends. Each time it comes out, they may change the parameters. So, but to do it, the best thing to do is to hire a grant writer. You pay somebody, and it could cost you $1,500, but we had the name, he gave us the name of the person that they were using. They basically write the grant, and they have a success rate of like 80 or 90%. Because they know, because when the government has something, they have specific things that they're looking for, specific words that make a difference. It's just like getting the summer grants for students. They have specific things that they look for, and if they see those words, okay, yes, we'll accept that. But if you don't, if the wording isn't right, no, that doesn't sound right, we're not going to accept that. So you got to be willing to pay somebody, but it's worth it. So it is.
The other grant that's out there now is the Ontario Church Security Grant. That's up to like $15,000 a year, and it's just to keep your building safe. And now it's intended for other faith groups, but we're included in that. I got $15,000 to do windows, because our windows, someone could break into our old windows, and they don't care.
That's great.
But there are grants, and like, if you keep your eyes open, they're there. And they just want you to go through the process, it's all above board, and you gotta account for it afterwards. But we put a new security system in, we put in new windows. I put in 2 rock pillars at the side of our driveway to frame it in, so I could put a chain across, right, to block the driveway for when we do events.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, that's security,
That's great.
Wow.
Yeah.
that Ontario security's.
We've accessed both of those grants, the disability, the security one, and it's tremendously helpful.
Okay.
LED lights too. There was a grant a number of years ago where you can replace the
I
lights.
think we did that too.
We're doing that too, yes. So, okay. And then also sharing resources from other churches, yes.
Just saying you have 5 minutes.
Okay, so then we're almost done. Sharing resources from other churches. My previous church, we used to do, we called it Make a Difference. It was a summer Make a Difference project. And my associate would lead a team of people from the church, and it was adults and young people, and they would go bless a church plant, usually with Fed Central. And there were people on that team who did not want to do vacation Bible school, they'd rather do something with their hands. And so we typically go to a small little church up north or something like that, and we'd go bless that church doing projects, painting, renovating, helping, things like that. There are churches looking to do projects like that if you're a small church. And you could bless another church. My son, he's in a small church in Quebec, in Dalesville, Quebec. 200-year-old building, and it looked like a museum. And there was a group from the States that were looking to come to the mission field of Quebec. And they said, we'd like to come up. They helped raise some funding for that project, and they came and they blessed that church, retrofitting so much of that building, and just being blessed that way from another church that had a few more dollars towards a missions project. So you can be creative that way and tap a bigger church on the shoulder and say, hey, would you come and help us with this? And you might be able to have some strategic partnership that way. I'd encourage you to include a capital expense line in your annual budget saying, hey, our furnaces need maintenance, or we only have so much life left on this roof, or we only have so much life on these furnaces, or parking lot, and to have money set aside for those things. I wish my church did that. Now that we're looking at 4.1 million in retrofitting some things there. But that's something to consider. In fact, we're doing that now more and more, just having that capital expense, because to be in the building in Canada, it just costs money. Budget items that need to be replaced with timelines. Example 2026, yeah, furnace replacement or roof replacement, and put those good hard estimates in there, and that's helpful. Just so you have that on the horizon, you know it's going to cost that, and you need to set aside that money for that, or get the money for those things. So, happy to talk further if you'd like to talk further about anything. I know Mark would be happy to talk further. Our emails are on there, and yeah. Any other questions, comments?
If anybody has an old boiler, talk to me. We put in a $3,000 economy computerized module that we had paid for in less than 2 years on our gas savings. Wow.
3,000?
Yeah, it wasn't very much. And it just,
They replaced it for 3,000?
not the boiler.
Okay.
No, the boiler's working, but we were paying huge amounts on fuel. Because the boiler's always keeping the water at some temperature. But a guy, and again, the maintenance of the boiler was always done by someone's old friend who didn't know new tech. I said, this is nuts. We found a new guy. He said, yeah, for $2,000, I can put a controller on this. You'll save your money in no time. In 2 years, our gas prices, like, it basically curves it out, paid for itself. And we're like, that's awesome. And we don't have to replace a new boiler.
Because we replaced our boiler
Yeah.
for 50 years ago, in like previous years.
Ours is 50 years old.
That was 5,000. No, that was
Yeah.
$50,000.
It's not, yeah, it's not cheap. Yeah.
Any other comments, questions? Well, thanks for hanging out with us this afternoon. Did you want to say anything? Okay. God bless you, you're dismissed.